Hello and welcome back to Starside Cafe. Today I thought I'd do a belated video about Link's Awakening. While I never played the original Game Boy version, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening 2019 feels like a modern take on top-down Zelda or other games of the SNES Game Boy era. And it's fitting to maintain that style considering the Nintendo Switch is also a handheld console. A handheld console that feels as revolutionary today as the original Game Boy did back in the late 80s and early 90s.
They said it wasn't humanly possible, but now you can have all the power and excitement of Nintendo right in the palm of your hand. Introducing Game Boy.
And Nintendo has been leaning into that fact with remakes of some of their most iconic and beloved Game Boy classics. Last year's Pokemon Let's Go was a remake of Pokemon Yellow, and of course now we have a remake of Link's Awakening. And to be honest, I look forward to more of these remakes if these first two are a sign of things to come. In fact, for much of my playtime with Link's Awakening, I couldn't shake the feeling that this game represented the game design sensibilities of those early 90s games I grew up on, while utilizing 2019 technology. Admittedly, that puts it in a bit of a weird area, yet considering so many other modern games aim to capture that retro vibe, and of course a good size of the player base will love how nostalgic it feels to play the game, Link's Awakening with its charming visuals, solid feeling controls, and interesting puzzle design works incredibly well in 2019. Some may lament that the game costs $60, after all you could just pick up the original on 3DS for $5.99, they're basically the exact same game. Or hope that Nintendo adds it for free on the Nintendo Switch to subscribers of Nintendo's online service. They're bringing back NES and SNES games, why wouldn't they also eventually add Game Boy games from that era? There's a legitimate question to be asked, is the visual redesign worth $60? More importantly, why not take the opportunity to really modernize the game? Instead of simply leaving everything the way it was but upgrading the visuals, why not take the opportunity to build the game in the Breath of the Wild engine? Instead of using 2019 technology to rebuild a game from 1993, use a 1993 game as the basis for a true 2019 game. I don't know that I'd say you're wrong for asking such a question, but I do know that I loved my time with Link's Awakening regardless. And if this is what it takes for a modern audience to play a retro game, I'm glad they went to the effort one way or another. You could also make the case that because Link's Awakening is a pretty bizarre and different take on the franchise from a story perspective, it justifies its colorful, cutesy, tilt-shift, dreamy dollhouse visuals, and that hardcore fans wouldn't want a huge departure from the original game anyway. Either way, I think what they've done here works very well. In fact, the story of Link's Awakening makes the perfect case for the visuals. As Link travels by ship across a vast sea, a storm destroys his boat and he washes ashore on Koholint Island. After spending some time exploring the island, Link learns that it's nothing more than a dream world created by the Windfish, and he must collect 8 instruments from 8 dungeons spread across the island in order to play the song that will wake the Windfish and allow him to wake from this bizarre dream world. After all, it's in the title, Link's Awakening suggests a dream world from the very beginning. And knowing that the game takes place within a dream world makes the tilt-shift visuals make a lot of sense. There's even a blur vignetting around the outer portion of the frame that adds another dreamy element to the visuals. That also makes the fact that Goombas, Yoshi dolls, Chain Chomps, and other Mario franchise crossovers appear in the game less strange. So not only was keeping the more top-down style a measure to appease nostalgic gamers who loved the original, the visual style makes sense in the context of the narrative. But that doesn't mean they couldn't have made a few quality of life improvements for the modern gamer. They did make a few. For instance, rather than having the map scroll from frame to frame, Link stays center frame and you move about like it's a more true open world. And the original only let you equip 2 items at a time, which meant you had to constantly go into your inventory to swap items depending on which one you needed. While you still have to do that some of the time here, many of the items you collect over the course of the game remain permanently equipped. So you can just pick up large rocks once you've picked up the power bracelet rather than having to equip and unequip it over and over again. Maybe my biggest complaint is admittedly a small thing, but every time you pick up an item, in particular the items that allow you to do more sword damage or Link to take less damage upon being hit, a little text pop-up happens and it completely breaks the flow of the action, and it's pretty slow to allow you to click through it. I understand having it the first time so players know what they just picked up, but it shouldn't happen any other time after that. The game also suffers from frame rate drops and other little stutters and performance issues related to its dynamic resolution scaling. But these performance hiccups are usually confined to moments where you're first entering a new area of the map or when you're doing certain actions, but they fade away fairly quickly. Yet these performance issues happen often enough that they will most certainly be noticeable, and they happen regardless of whether you're playing in portable mode or docked mode. Technical issues aside, the game still looks great, plays great, and has some great puzzle design. The dungeons in particular can be tricky to work out to the point where I consulted a guide multiple times throughout my playthrough, but the game does a relatively good job of guiding you on your path and helping you to figure out where you're supposed to go next and how to solve its puzzles. When trial and error or general exploration fail you, you can always use a phone to call a helpful friend for guidance on where to go next. I wouldn't say combat ever gets overly hard or tedious, instead the challenge comes in the form of puzzle solving. Like any Zelda game, as you complete dungeons and acquire new equipment and more heart pieces, there's a general sense of growing in power. You can access more and more locations and solve more and more puzzles you previously couldn't, so continued exploration, even of places you've been before, is always rewarded. And the game does a good job of allowing you to utilize all the new tools at your disposal the more you play. While the first dungeon may only force you to make use of 1 item, you may have to make use of 3 or 4 items to get through the 4th dungeon. It's tried and true game mechanics that have been borrowed and copied by many other games, but rarely done as well as in the Zelda franchise. If you've never played Link's Awakening before, don't expect a lengthy journey on the same level as Breath of the Wild. You should be able to get through it in far less time, but it's still a fun, charming little pocket-sized adventure that's well worth taking if you have a Switch. But I want to know if you've played Link's Awakening or if you're planning to. Let me know in the comments and I'll catch you on the next one.